Welcome back to Fast Market here on the TD Ameritrade Network. And let's bring in our next guest for our cash tag segment. That's going to be Andy Swan, the co-founder of Likefolio. Welcome back to the show, Andy.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday to you. So Uber stock's up about 32% so far in 2023. Last quarter, Andy, first time they had 2 billion trips in a single quarter. That averages out to nearly a million trips per hour. What kind of data are you guys seeing on Likefolio? Because everybody seems optimistic. Stock's up 5% ahead of the results.
Yeah, well, those are just mind-blowing numbers. You know, I can't imagine what it's like to operate that business. A million trips an hour is just kind of mind-blowing, and you start to think, how could it even scale from there? How could it have even gotten there? But I do think Uber's one of the best managed, forward-looking companies in the world. They're in what I would call kind of no man's land in terms of the macro environment. We're really seeing overall ride sharing or ride hailing mentions and demand kind of flatten out in terms of, on a per user basis. It's one of those things I think, if you're cutting back your spending, you're probably spending less nights out on the town, less big dinners, and that means you probably don't need a ride to and from those dinners like you did before. Same with travel. So I think overall the macro environment is kind of no man's land for Uber. I think the same is true on food delivery. The good news on food delivery, I think, for Uber is that this is a company that has effectively fended off all but one competitor. They made a key acquisition, but in terms of everybody but DoorDash, Uber is winning that in a big way. And on the ride-sharing front, they really seem to have beaten Lyft, and that's something Likefolio saw quite a while ago, is that actually Uber going into food delivery and other sort of local logistics operations improved their capabilities so much, improved their driver base so much that people weren't having to wait for rides nearly as long as they were on Lyft, and they were able to offer it at cheaper prices. I think Uber's the better experience, and you see them winning over Lyft. On the food delivery side, DoorDash is a very, very strong competitor. We don't see that going anywhere, but they're one or two in each of those two industries, or in each of those two sectors. We just think there's not a lot going on in those two sectors. So this is more a chance for investors to say, all right, Uber long-term, if I like it long-term, I think this is a company that's investing in the future, that executes really well, and that has pretty much put most of its competition in the rearview mirror.
Andy, anywhere in this brilliant, forward-looking universe that we talk about with Uber, do they see profits anywhere in the forward-looking? Because what I'd really like them to do, like they made 29 cents last quarter, but it was because of a $750 million unrealized investment gain, or they'd have lost money. As good as Tom is talking about the numbers, they'd have still lost money if it wasn't for this investment. So I get it. Put on your CEO Andy Swan hat for a minute. What's going to be the thing that gets this company to profitability? Because I get that they've changed an industry completely, but they got, Andy, eventually they have to make money, right?
Yeah, they do. And I think, the answer to that question is really very simple, and that's get rid of the drivers. If you get to a point where you're doing 1 million rides an hour, or let's say by the time you get to actual autonomous driving in, let's say 2028, something like that, you're up to 2 million or 3 million per hour, and now all of a sudden you don't need drivers for 70% of those. Well, that's money just staying in your pocket that was going out the door, and that can be 30+% of the value of each one of those rides or deliveries. And so I think ultimately, that's where this company is betting on. I think they're investing a lot of money and a lot of resources into autonomous driving. It seems far away, but I'll tell you, as a user in a Tesla vehicle, watching that full self-driving capability get better and better every couple of weeks, it's really kind of mind-blowing. And I think, once that switch flips, it's going to be a really, really, really big deal. It could be a ways out, but I think this is the one company of all of them that could actually pull it off. And I think that's kind of the binary bet that investors are faced with here, because you're right. Until then, this is a company that's going to grow really big and continue to lose a little bit of money, or maybe make a little bit of money for a long time.
Yeah, their forecast a net loss of about $178 million or 9 cents a share, as Kevin mentioned. If that goes positive, and I think that's what maybe a lot of investors today are thinking, stock's up 5%. But Andy, you know, you mentioned the competitive advantage that they have now. As far as happiness goes, you know, for this company based maybe against Lyft, it seems like Lyft has really failed the last year and a half. They haven't basically taken advantage of maybe working in there with customer service. But is happiness playing a big part here in Uber, that people are just, you know, more adept to using it on a consistent basis?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's kind of like, you know, I hate to use this analogy because the folks at Uber will hate it, but they're kind of like McDonald's in a lot of ways, in that you pretty much know what you're going to get. You're not exactly always thrilled, you know, but the consistency is greater than others. And so while happiness scores for these companies generally aren't super positive, kind of like airlines, you know, Uber does hold a consistency level that makes users make it the first click that they make on their phone. They're not clicking Lyft and then Uber, they're clicking Uber and then Lyft, and by and large, Uber is winning that business on the first click.
And then do you have a score for this one going into earnings?
Yeah, exactly zero, exactly neutral. This is one where I just want to see what the company says about the future. I'm far more interested in the way that they speak about the future than I am the current results. I do think that there'll be some pressure to maybe get rid of some of the head count like Lyft did. But overall, I think this is just a company that if you're not thinking long term, it's a really, really tough trade.
Yeah, CEO Dara usually gives a pretty decent outlook on his conference call, so that'll be definitely one to watch. All right, Andy, great stuff as always. Great data. Have a great day.
Thank you, you too.
All right, that's Andy Swan, co-founder of Likefolio, breaking down the data for us on Uber. Kevin, you know, it seems pretty positive.